When a black man came to stay, he did things I never expected, a quiet evening alone, until an unexpected guest arrives. My husband assured me he was harmless, but the way he watched me, the way he lingered in the shadows, it sent shivers down my spine. Then, in the dead of night, I heard it, slow, steady breathing, right outside my bedroom door. I never thought much about having a stranger stay in my home. It wasn't something I had planned, but when my husband Mark called me that evening, everything changed. The house was quiet, too quiet, just the way I liked it. But when my phone buzzed, I had no idea that one conversation would turn my peaceful home into a place of unease. "Hey, babe," Mark's voice came through casual but rushed. "Listen, I forgot to mention, one of my colleagues is coming into town for a few days. I told him he could stay at our place." I blinked, gripping my phone tighter. "Wait, what?" "His name is Daniel. He's a great guy, don't worry. Since we have the guest room, I figured it wouldn't be a big deal." A stranger, in my house, while Mark was away. The thought sent a shiver down my spine. But what could I do? He was already on his way. That night, when the doorbell rang, my stomach twisted into knots. I took a deep breath and opened the door. There he was, tall, broad-shouldered, and calm. Too calm. His dark eyes held something unreadable, and when he smiled, it didn't quite reach them. "You must be Mark's wife," he said smoothly. I forced a polite nod. "And you're Daniel." "That's me." He held out his hand. I hesitated, then shook it. But the moment I did, I regretted it. His grip was firm, too firm, like he was testing me. And his eyes, they lingered just a little too long. I wanted to shake the feeling off, to believe I was overreacting. But deep down, something told me this wasn't going to be as simple as Mark thought. I stepped aside, letting Daniel in, and as he walked past me, I caught a faint scent of something unfamiliar, like old leather and faint cologne. His presence immediately changed the energy in the house. It wasn't that he did anything wrong, but something about him made the air feel heavier. "You have a beautiful home," he said, setting his duffel bag down near the couch. His voice was deep, steady. "Thank you," I replied, keeping my tone polite. "Mark said you'd be staying for a few days?" "Just 3, he nodded. "I really appreciate it." I tried to smile, but it felt forced. "Your room is down the hall. The bathroom is next to it. Let me know if you need anything." He glanced around, his eyes taking in every detail of the house. It was subtle, but I noticed. He wasn't just looking, he was observing, studying. As I walked to the kitchen, I could feel his gaze on my back. I busied myself with pouring a glass of water, trying to push away the strange tension in the air. Maybe I was just being paranoid. Maybe it was the idea of having a stranger in my home while Mark was gone that was making me uneasy. "You live here alone most of the time?" His voice cut through the silence, making me flinch. I turned, finding him standing in the doorway. He had moved so quietly, I hadn't even heard him approach. "No," I answered quickly. "Mark just has a work trip. He'll be back soon." Daniel gave a small smile. "Must be nice, having all this space to yourself." I forced a chuckle. "I guess." He didn't say anything else, just nodded and walked back down the hall. I watched as he disappeared into the guest room, closing the door behind him. That night I tried to sleep, but every little sound in the house felt magnified. The floor creaked, the wind brushed against the windows, and somewhere in the darkness I thought I heard movement. I held my breath, listening. Nothing. Shaking my head, I pulled the blanket tighter around me. I was overthinking things. Daniel was just a guest. But then, around 2 a.m., I woke up again, and this time, I knew I wasn't imagining it. Somewhere in the house, a floorboard creaked, slow, deliberate, and it was coming from just outside my bedroom door. I held my breath, my heartbeat pounding in my ears. The house was dark, the silence pressing in on me like a thick fog. Another creak, closer this time. My body stiffened as I turned toward the door, barely able to make out the faint outline of the handle in the dim light. Someone was there, standing just outside my room. I swallowed hard, forcing myself to stay calm. Maybe it was just the house settling. Maybe I was imagining things. But then, as if to confirm my worst fear, the doorknob twitched. Just slightly. Not enough to open, but enough to let me know that someone, Daniel, was awake and moving. I lay completely still, waiting, listening. The knob didn't turn again, and after a long, agonizing moment, I heard the softest sound of retreating footsteps. Slow, unhurried, like whoever was there wasn't in a rush, as if they wanted me to know they had been standing there, just inches away. I stayed frozen for a long time, staring at the door, my body too tense to relax. Eventually, exhaustion pulled me under, but my sleep was restless, filled with half-dreams of shadows moving through my house. The next morning, I found Daniel in the kitchen, casually stirring a cup of coffee like nothing had happened. He looked up and smiled. "Morning. Hope I didn't wake you last night. I had trouble sleeping." My stomach tightened. "You were up?" He nodded, taking a sip. "Yeah, just walking around a bit. Old habit." I tried to read his expression, but it was calm. Too calm. I wanted to ask why he had been near my room, why he had touched my door, but something in me hesitated. What if I was wrong? What if I accused him and it turned out to be nothing? Instead, I just nodded, pretending to accept his answer. "I see." But I knew I had to be careful. Throughout the day, I caught him watching me. Little glances, quick but noticeable. He never said anything out of place, never acted aggressively, but his presence felt heavier with each passing hour. I found myself checking the locks twice, keeping my phone close and feeling my heart race every time he moved too suddenly. By evening, the tension had settled into my bones. Something was wrong. I just didn't know what. And as night fell again, I realized I wasn't ready to find out. That night, I barely slept. Every little sound made my body tense, my mind running wild with possibilities. I kept my door locked, but even that didn't feel like enough. I didn't know what I was afraid of exactly. Daniel hadn't done anything outright threatening. But there was something about the way he moved, the way he watched me when he thought I wasn't looking. It sent a chill down my spine. Around midnight, I heard it again. Footsteps, slow, deliberate, moving through the hallway. My pulse quickened as I lay there, holding my breath. The sound stopped right outside my door. I could almost feel his presence on the other side, just standing there, waiting. I squeezed my eyes shut, gripping the edge of my blanket like a lifeline. Then, softly, so softly, I almost missed it. I heard the doorknob jiggle. My heart slammed against my ribs. It wasn't my imagination. He was trying to open it. A rush of panic took over, but I stayed still, pretending to be asleep, hoping he would go away. The knob rattled again, more insistent this time. My breathing became shallow, my mind racing with what to do. Call someone? Make a noise? But then, just as suddenly as it started, it stopped. The footsteps retreated down the hall. I stayed awake for the rest of the night, unable to shake the fear that he might come back. By morning, I had made up my mind. I needed answers. At breakfast, Daniel was just as calm as ever. He sat at the table, stirring his coffee, looking completely at ease, but I wasn't fooled. "I heard you again last night," I said, watching him closely, outside my door. He didn't flinch. Instead, he set his mug down carefully and met my gaze. "I told you," he said smoothly. "I have trouble sleeping." Something about the way he said it made my skin crawl. Why were you trying to open my door? I asked, my voice steady despite the tension in my chest. Daniel tilted his head slightly, as if considering his answer. Then, after a long pause, he smiled. I wasn't. The way he said it, so calm, so confident, made my stomach twist. He was lying. I knew it. But the worst part? He knew that I knew, and he didn't care. I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. The way Daniel held my gaze, so steady and unbothered, made my stomach tighten. He wasn't just lying. He wanted me to know he was lying. There was something deeply unsettling about that realization. I wanted to push further, demand answers, but something inside me whispered that I shouldn't. That whatever game he was playing, I wasn't ready for it. The rest of the day passed in a strange haze. I couldn't focus on work, couldn't concentrate on anything. Every time I glanced at Daniel, he was perfectly normal, as if last night had never happened. He read a book in the living room, made himself tea, even hummed a little while washing his cup. It was infuriating. How could he act so casual after what he had done? That night, I locked my door again, double-checked it this time. My heart pounded in my chest as I lay in bed, waiting for the inevitable. But the hours stretched on, and nothing happened. No footsteps, no rattling doorknob, just silence. By 3 in the morning, exhaustion finally pulled me under. When I woke up, something felt wrong. The air in my room was different, heavier. I sat up slowly, rubbing my eyes, and then I saw it. My door. It was open. I sucked in a sharp breath. I knew without a doubt that I had locked it. My hands shook as I threw off the covers and stepped toward the doorway, heart hammering in my chest. The hallway was empty, no sign of Daniel. I rushed to check the lock. It was intact, no signs of damage, but that only made it worse, because that meant he had unlocked it. Somehow he had gotten in. I spun around, scanning my room for anything out of place, and that's when I noticed it. My phone. It wasn't where I had left it. I always kept it charging on my nightstand, but now it was on my desk, the screen facing up. I grabbed it, my fingers trembling as I unlocked it. My stomach dropped. A message had been sent from my phone. To Daniel. It was just one word. Why? I stared at it in horror. I hadn't sent that. I knew I hadn't. But the timestamp showed it had been sent at 2:47 a.m., when I had been fast asleep. A wave of nausea washed over me. He had been in my room. He had taken my phone. And worst of all, he had texted himself. I scrambled to check my call logs, my photos, anything that could tell me what else he had done. Everything else seemed normal, untouched. But that only made it creepier. He hadn't taken anything. He hadn't changed anything. He just wanted me to know he had been there. My hands tightened around the phone as I backed away from my desk, my breath coming in short, panicked gasps. I had to get out. Now. But as I turned to grab my jacket, a voice stopped me cold. You look like you've seen a ghost. I spun around. Daniel stood in my doorway, leaning against the frame, watching me with that same unreadable smile. My blood ran cold. He was waiting for me to react, waiting to see what I would do. And in that moment, I knew one thing for certain. This wasn't just a game to him. It never had been. My breath caught in my throat as I locked eyes with Daniel. He didn't move, didn't blink. He just stood there, watching me, like he was enjoying this moment. I forced myself to swallow the fear rising in my chest and took a slow step back. I don't know what you're talking about, I muttered, gripping my phone tighter. My voice was shaking, but I hoped he wouldn't notice. Daniel tilted his head slightly, as if considering something. Then he smiled, calm, almost amused. You shouldn't leave your door unlocked, he said. It's not safe. A cold wave of anger rushed through me. He was playing with me, twisting reality to make me question myself. But I wasn't going to let him win. I locked it, I said firmly. You unlocked it. Silence. For a moment, I thought I saw something shift in his expression, like he was surprised I had figured it out so quickly. But just as fast as it came, it was gone. He let out a small chuckle, shaking his head. You're a smart one. I had heard enough. I stepped past him, moving quickly toward the front door. Every instinct in me screamed to run, to get as far away from him as possible. But as I reached for the handle, his voice stopped me cold. You should check your phone again. My fingers tightened around it, my heart racing. I didn't want to look, but I had to. Slowly, I lifted the screen. My stomach dropped. There was another message, sent from my phone. It's done. I didn't understand. What was done? Who had I supposedly sent this to? My eyes darted to the recipient. There was no name, just a number I didn't recognize. My mind spun with possibilities, none of them good. I turned to face him, my voice barely above a whisper. What did you do? Daniel smiled again, but this time it wasn't amused. It was knowing, like he was waiting for me to put the pieces together. And then it hit me. The call last night, the way he had been acting, the strange message. He wasn't just messing with me. He had set me up. I hadn't just been his target. I had been his accomplice, and I didn't even know what I had helped him do. My hands trembled as I stared at the screen. My mind raced, trying to make sense of it all. The message, the unlocked door, the way Daniel had been watching me this whole time. I forced myself to stay calm, even as my pulse pounded in my ears. Tell me what you did, I said, my voice barely steady. Daniel let out a small sigh, as if he was tired of the conversation. You'll find out soon enough, he said. Then he took a step back, his hands raised slightly, as if to show he wasn't a threat. But don't worry, you played your part perfectly. Panic shot through me. My part? I hadn't done anything, at least not knowingly. I scrolled frantically through my phone, looking for any clue, any message, any action I might have taken without realizing it. My mind flashed back to last night when I had dozed off with my phone in my hand. Had he done something then? Had he used my device while I was asleep? I turned back to him, my throat dry. You set me up. Daniel's lips curled into that same unreadable smile. No, he said quietly. I gave you a choice. You just didn't realize you made it. A sharp knock at the door made me jump. My stomach clenched. I glanced at Daniel, but he was already backing away toward the hallway. I'd answer that if I were you, he said. It's time to face the consequences. My breath came in quick gasps as I reached for the door. My fingers felt numb against the cold metal handle. Slowly, I pulled it open. 2 officers stood outside. Their faces were unreadable, their gazes sharp. Are you my name? One of them asked. I nodded, my voice trapped in my throat. We need you to come with us. I turned to look over my shoulder, but Daniel was gone. The hallway was empty, as if he had never been there at all. A chill ran down my spine as I stepped outside, the weight of the unknown pressing heavily on my shoulders. Whatever had happened, whatever role I had unknowingly played, it was too late to undo it now.